You know, water can be really easily taken for granted. How we get it, how we use it, where it comes from, what we pay for it when it comes in, what you do with it when you're done with it. But it's pretty important. And there are a lot of ways that I could get water here to my off-grid workshop. But what I've decided to do is use rainwater catch. And it's a great time of the day to make this video because it's actually pouring down rain outside, and give you a pretty good idea how this thing works. Let me take you around and show you. So everything starts obviously with the rain, and like I said, today we've got a great amount of rain coming in. And the way this particular shop works is I have a metal building. So the actual footprint is 48 by 40. The main roof up here is on the high pitch, is part of a 48 by 30, and then we have the 10-foot section that comes out. It's actually a little bit more than that with the eaves, but you get the idea. The actual roof is about 50 across by, about 30, 32 or so total width. So there's quite a bit of space up here to generate rainwater collection. What we first do, we come in through the main gutters. I have a type of flush, or a first flush, that first fills up the water into this tube here. And this catches the early sediment that comes off the roof, along with any, bird droppings and different things, and collects in the tube down here. This particular tube, I don't tighten it all the way, and it will steadily drip off water in between the dry spells, and that'll help it to empty back out so that the first bit of dirty water that comes in collects in these. And there's one on both sides. So once there's enough rain, the pipe fills up to this T, and that T begins to fill the pipe here, and it has a sister on the other side that matches. And once those come in, it drops into the tank. So the tank is a 1,000 gallon. It's black for a reason. And it's designed to hold water only. This particular tank is connected into my water system. We'll go inside in a little bit. Right here on this fitting that I've added. So there is 1/2-inch PEX line that directly tees into the bottom of the tank. And notice I don't go to the very, very bottom. It's been my experience doing this for about 3.5 years now that you do pick up sediment no matter how much you try to keep this thing completely clean. You can hear it collecting right now. One of the nice advantages here, we have a gauge. This is a kind of a one-size-fits-all gauge that you calibrate it to your tank. So we're really close to hitting our 1,000-gallon mark right now. And as that needle comes along, once we get here, we'll know we're full. As far as the tank itself, I've taken a couple of preventative measures. Oh, that's nice right there. Get an idea how steady it's pouring in. So this tank has a screen that stops any large items that might have gotten through some other screens and through the first flushes. And I modified the cap itself to go in. This is just to keep additional sunlight out. It's been my experience, any sunlight that can get in will instantaneously, magically, miraculously turn into algae. Once this tank reaches its near overfull point, it'll begin draining out, and the drain comes out, empties along here, and this comes out this point with this screen that I put in, and that's designed to keep rodents or other type of whatever from going backwards into it and plugging it up. Now, you might say to yourself that obviously that's not enough drainage. And what I do for now, when I know the tank is full and I'm in no need to collect additional water, is I just remove the cap. And when you remove the cap, if you'll notice, the way gravity falls, it turns this back into a regular gutter system, and out to the ground it goes. So that's our tank. All right, coming inside the shop, we'll get the business end of how things work over here. So what you're looking at is a Shurflo pump. This particular pump has a check valve in it. It has a 45 psi cutoff switch. It has a filter system to catch any large debris from going in. And before you think that I've just got a rat's nest of things, none of these are connected. Okay, none of these are actually connected. What I did is I put spare pumps that I have over here so that if I lose water from this pump, I can switch over at any time. I just keep them here handy where they're easy to get to, but those are extra. What these do is you have to wire them into your plug system the way they're provided by Shurflo. This pump, whenever I do have it on, I add this additional heat sink. That heat sink is good to let this pump run longer. Shurflo considers these pumps to run continuous duty for only about 45 minutes, and then they want them to shut off and cool. I can extend that time. I don't know for how long I can extend it, but I extend it by adding the heat sink. If you go to the Shurflo website and you look at some of the tank pumps they have, the continuous duty pumps they have are very, very similar to this, but they have a heat sink that's permanently on the back. So I've talked to them directly in tech, and they've indicated that this does provide a tremendous amount more of runtime. I've never had an issue. These pumps have been different ones I've had over the years. This one I actually broke. There's epoxy on there. It is just a pure backup. And this is one that I thought had failed, but it turned out I was having a problem with priming it, and that was on me. So this pump is perfect. This pump is perfect. This one's perfect except for that, and it's just a pure backup. So once the water comes in, these pumps can lift up to about 12 feet. So you'll notice I'm about 26 inches, 24 inches from the bottom of where that picks up in the tank. This can definitely pull plenty of vacuum on that to create a prime and suck it in. We're in good shape there. I wanted it at a height that I could get to it, not too high where it had to work too hard, and definitely inside the house. And you'll see, or the shop, I mean. And you'll notice here we have foam and stuff around it. These pumps can get a little noisy, and it is what it is. So let's follow the pump along. Once it comes in, this side's under pressure. I go into a T right here, and this fitting goes into my pressure tank. The pressure tank is actually 40 gallons, and this is a crucial piece to making your off-grid water supply function as normal as possible. The goal is to have a very consistent, steady water pressure and to keep the pump from running essentially every time you turn on a spigot or a tap. So this will pressurize the tank. Your tanks, whether it's one this big or smaller, doesn't matter, have an air nozzle on the top that allows you to adjust the appropriate pressure to the air bladder inside, and that keeps a continuous pressure in the system. Even if the pump quits running or I run out of water, the pressure, if I run out of water in the tank and the pump quits, what's left in here will continue to pump through the system until it's empty. So these are pretty handy and really an essential piece. The bigger the tank that you can have, the far better you are for long-term use of your pump, and it reduces the amount of cycle. All right, moving on from the tank, you see where my line is plumbed here, and you might be thinking to yourself, that's kind of odd. Why in the world is he running plumbing through the inside of his garage like this when normal civilized people put it inside the walls? That's actually a good question. So this particular workshop is in the Midwest. We're in the central Illinois region, and it gets quite cold. With wind chill, we can see -40 during the winter. So I keep this shop heated. It does have a furnace, and we do keep it heated throughout the winter at a low temperature. And this allows me to help protect these pipes by keeping them inside. So anyway, my line comes in, and in multiple places I actually have shut-off points to turn it on and off so I can service it. This is the future home of a outlet box for this washing machine. I find a lot of use for washing rags and towels and things that are used out here in the shop, and that works great. Right now it's kind of temporary, but it's going to have a permanent fixture there in the near future. My lines come in through that wall. They travel through this wall, which is plenty okay because it stays during the winter inside. And then inside here we have our other lines. A lot of stuff going on. Honestly, I'd prefer not to look at it myself, but I do know with it being in here, it's 100% protected. All right, so what do you do with the rainwater? Well, one thing is I can heat it. This Easy Tankless is amazing. Absolutely love this thing, and it's crazy inexpensive. It's perfect for an off-grid type application where power may or may not be available. It actually just uses D-cell batteries in here, and that triggers the on for the igniter. It runs on propane, and as the water processes through, everything's good. And you might be saying, wait, Chris, that's dangerous to have a water heater inside this little bathroom, and I don't disagree. So what we did, this particular bathroom has no ceiling there, no wall there, and right here we have an open gap for airflow. And the little bit that I do use it in here for showering, I have no problem with ventilation. This to be indoors requires a certain amount of ventilation. And during the wintertime, those of you that are curious, this goofy piece of sheet metal, I actually use it to block this off. I turn this stuff off during the extreme winter, and I block that, and I put some insulation in it. Don't ask me how I found out the importance of that, other than pipes do freeze in the winter when you have 20 minus below Fahrenheit air blowing in here into your tank, and next thing you know, or your tankless tank, the next thing you know, you've got cracked pipes. So my water system also runs here to my sink, and we have 2 outlets in the shop for going outside. There's an outlet on this end, and there's an outlet over on this end over here. Let's go take a look at that real quick. So to get an idea of what the water pressure is like when we're running off the pump, this is running at 45 psi coming out of the Shurflo pump through that pressure tank, and it's routed through the 1/2-inch lines that I run throughout the shop. This is a standard, to give you an idea what kind of spray I have out there. This is just a standard garden hose out here, and it has plenty of pressure. I'm able to spray and clean. And in fact, I frequently use my pressure washer when I'm cleaning my cars or other things out here, and this supplies adequate volume and pressure to operate my pressure washer. So we like it a lot, and one of the things it spends a lot of time doing is cleaning out these duct holes, because my oh my do they make a mess. But it's nice to be able to give them a fresh drink of water. So let me just diagram out for you some of the basics about a water rain catch system. Obviously, you need the slope of your roof to collect the rainwater. In your gutter system, it's important to have some sort of a screen on that. So the gutters on this particular area have a screen. You can get them at your hardware store, and that stops the large debris from getting in. It catches it right here and holds it on top, and then on a windy day, it just blows that away. So you start out with your rain catch system. On what would be your first flush or your initial area of rainwater collection, you got to have some way of stopping it up. Now right now, and mine have been for going on 4 years, manual, and literally then that means I come out and actually plug and unplug that. There are options here, many different ways you can go. But if I plug this, obviously while it's raining, this tube is going to fill full, okay? And that's okay, because what happens here then, the first amount of crud and dirt that comes off the roof goes and settles in here. And then, from this point forward, let's make this 3-dimensional. From this point forward, we can catch the overflow and take it to a tank. Once we move to that tank, we filtered our water from large debris here, we filtered sediment down here, and now I have a larger filter that sits in the neck of the water collection tank as that fills up. Now as this fills, my gauge out there has a bobber on the end on a string that goes up and allows that to move up and down with the amount collected. Once this is full, we have to exhaust it out somewhere or it's just going to spill out the lid. So at the neck, you have your drain spout for your overflow. Now in the future, I'll increase the size of this. Ultimately, you could design this so these perhaps could be plugged all the time and the tank would simply always stay full because there was adequate overflow. But for now, I turn mine on and off as needed by opening the caps or closing them. But of course, once this is full, you see it rushing out. And you always want to put some sort of a screen in here, again, to block rodents or to try to slow down insects from making nests up inside. And that's your water tank system. So what do we do after we've collected it? All right, so now we've collected the rainwater, or we're collecting it. We've got our tank, and it's full, and we have our pickup coming out. So once we take that pickup, we put it into a pump. It's been my experience, the closer you get the pump to the tank, the best. Certainly in this situation, not a problem. If you could be in a situation where your pickup was downhill from the tank, that would be even better because gravity can be your friend. But once we have it in here, we can siphon it in from the tank. And again, that Shurflo pump, it runs on 110 volt, 115 volt, and it will pull up to 12 feet. So literally, I could have the pump up here and pulling in, but there's no need for that. Once we pick up from the tank, now we have pressured water, and this will pressure to 45 psi, okay? 45 psi is what this will go up to once it reaches maximum pressure. That 45 psi is now ready. You just turn the valve on and off and it's ready to use. However, we want to use it in a more consistent, steady fashion. So in order to do that, put a T in it and run it over to a pressure tank, okay? Your pressure tank will take the water that comes in. It has a bladder in here that is filled with air, and it'll hold a certain amount of pressure in the tank and a certain amount of water in the tank. So in the case of my application, I'm using a 40-gallon, as I've said before. All right, so from there, you can go out and feed whatever lines that you want to feed in the rest of your facility. And I found that I'm able to run lines up into the ceiling. I'm able to run them in other locations. Okay? So, here's a big question. Do I drink this water? Do I use it for human consumption? And the answer is I don't. Could I? Yeah, with the right filtration system or chemical additives, we certainly could make this potable water. All of the plumbing equipment that's used in here is all of drinking water quality, potable water quality grade, including the tank. But I don't drink that here. If we did, though, we would have additional filtering in our system, and that filtering could be at the point of use before we get to the sink in the kitchen area or in the bathroom area. Okay, we could come down and put a filter system in here for this. That would be easy enough. But in this situation, I'm not doing that as far as what I'm using the water for. So just a little bit for giggles and grins on hot water. You know, how do we do that in an off-grid situation? And I'm still using energy here. I'm not using the sun to heat any tanks or circulate, although all of those are possible, and those are all great ways of doing it. In my case, I'm using that Easy 101, and just want to show you how simple it is. So with the water heater being utilized, once that's in place for the actual water heater, okay, it's going to have a gas line that comes in. So my LP gas line comes in, okay. I have a fresh line that goes into it from my rain collection system pressurized water. It's going to come in, okay. That flows through here, and then it comes out. Now what it does is it senses whenever I open up the shower or I open up the sink on the hot tap and the water begins to flow through, it triggers this event to fire and cycle the burner. And within a few moments, whatever's coming in here is instantly heated and routed to my point of consumption. These things are super, super efficient. Because this shop is off grid, because it runs on solar, and it also runs on propane, I have to be cautious about the amount of energy that I'm using, especially to heat water. But I tell you what, with things like this Easy 101, there's absolutely no reason to not have hot water in the shop. The total space it takes up is next to nothing. Now, I do use a large amount of propane in terms of the tanks. I have a regular style setup like you would have in a home, but this thing will actually run off of just a regular portable tank like you use for your barbecue grill. So these are very handy, and for water purposes or for hot water purposes, it makes this thing work super well. All right, I'm gonna take you outside for just a moment here. It's a perfect day for doing this with the rain coming down. We've actually been super dry for a while, so very thankful to see this rain coming in. Let me take you back here and show you the past, okay? This has been my past. These tanks right here can be purchased. These are called totes, IBC. And you can find them just about anywhere. I found mine on Craigslist, and I paid anywhere from, I think, around $20 a piece to maybe as high as maybe $40 or $50 for the totes. And this is how it all began. And these actually work great. Really, really great. But the problem with these totes is that they're clear, or they're transparent, okay? And because they're transparent, if you leave them out in the sun full of water, it takes no time at all, and you end up growing a tremendous amount of algae in them. So these totes right here, the way that I had used them in the past, I started out with 2 together, and I noticed that I was using that water pretty quickly, and I eventually moved to 4. But the only way I can make this work is to plumb them all together into a quad. And that quad was quite the cumbersome mess. And I had to cover all of these with tarps to keep the sun off. So it became an eyesore for me on my porch, and we frequently found that rabbits and mice and birds and you name it were getting into these tanks and making a mess. So what's this one right here? This is actually a spare tank. My experience with purchasing these, I actually bought this from a fantastic company. They really do make good on their word and on their claims. But if you'll notice, this tank is damaged. And what happened is it came in damaged, and you have to inspect it before you agree to take possession of it, which I inspected it and found it to be damaged. And the shipper also agreed that it was damaged. I called the company, Plastic Tank Mart, and spoke to them, and they told me what to do, how to go ahead and take delivery of it so that it would be off the truck. And it's sitting out here now waiting for a return. And they were very, very good about actually sending me a new tank to replace this. But that obviously is some sort of a shipping damage. But that's what the tank looks like by itself compared to a tote. This is 1,000 gallons. And to give you a reference on price, okay, where these were used anywhere from $20 to $60, and again, you can find these all over Craigslist any day of the week. This tank was about $600 by itself. That's not the bad part per se, but shipping on it was around $300. So it's almost impossible to get one of these for less than $1,000 shipped, although the tank itself is less costly than that. Our local Tractor Supply will often have tanks in stock, and they can order tanks in. A lot of the tanks they have are the transparent kind, and that wouldn't do me any good. I'm done with that. I'm done with wrapping them and covering them. So that's the size comparison. This is 275 gallons when full, and this is 1,000. So if you do the math, I technically had more water before with my separate tanks, but this is so much cleaner. And who knows, when it's all over and done with, I may end up owning that one too, and I can make a small repair and get it functional. Let me show you what kind of plumbing hookups these things required. I'm going to take you up here to my loft and show you all the bits and pieces that are left over from the original setup. All right, this is just some of the pieces left over from the multi-tank system. This is how I used to get water into the rain catch. Each end of this pipe was connected to a tote. So I had two totes that were being fed from the rainwater in the past. And once that came in, this was actually my old overflow, which was a full 4-inch versus the 2-inch that's on the new tank. Once those things got in, I had to have all sorts of ways, and these are all chopped and cut up now. But I had to have all sorts of manifolds and pipes and pieces that ultimately would create the connection. So the nice thing about going with the one large tank that has a dedicated inlet outlet on it is that I didn't need all of these different ways. And again, this is actually just part of the piping and plumbing that I had between them. So you figure those other tanks, they're about 3 foot by just under 4 foot. They're sort of a rectangular footprint. And I had 4 of those tied together with all of these other parts in between. Now the good part was I probably had total in everything, maybe under $200, maybe under $300 for the bits and pieces and the 4 tanks. And of course, then they had to be wrapped with a permanent tarp that would keep the sunlight off of them. But at the end of the day, it was just a mess to deal with. And actually, that 1,000-gallon tank that I have now, you might ask yourself, why didn't I go with the 1,500-gallon tank? Because at that point, the shipping really doesn't cost anymore. But of course, the tanks are a little bit pricier, and a lot of that comes into size. And where I am on that side with the largest amount of roof exposure, the height that I have to work with on the fall between the gutter and the top of the tank is shorter with that particular porch on it. If I was collecting water off the back of the shop, I could go with a really tall tank and not have a problem. But those are all things that you have to consider whenever you are setting up your own system. So if you're considering doing a rain catch system of some sort, once you get past the collection phase of it, you're certainly going to have to fall into regular standard type of plumbing to bring the water to whatever particular final destination you want. And that's where there's a lot of good news as far as the amount of tools and things that you may need. So you can do PVC pipe, you can do copper pipe. There's a variety of things you can do. I like this PEX stuff. I like it for a couple reasons. It's actually very hardy to cold weather or hot weather. It's easy to run. It's flexible. It bends easily. And I call this plumber in a bag. This is so handy because it's the quick connect fittings, and you've seen them at your hardware store. You've seen them all around. They come in different brands. I have them in different styles. I have them in different brands, different materials. And these things are just wonderful because with a proper cutter, you cut your line to the length that you want it, and you essentially push this in place. And that takes care of your water connection. And it's reusable. So this particular one has a large flange on it. You can grab with your fingers. Some of them you'll use a tool. Some of them, I actually find that on a 1/2-inch pipe, a 5/8 open-end wrench works wonderful to put on here and apply pressure and remove them. So a lot of different types of fittings that you may use, not only the 90 degrees, but when you're using a pump system, you're going to have to connect to your pump. And the beauty of these is that you can get them pre-terminated with male or female fittings. And this will follow all the way around, right to your toilet, right to your shower, your hookups. Everything you could ever need is in one of these plumber and bag. Love those. These tools are inexpensive. Of course, what other tools might you need? Your normal, ordinary PVC stuff, your typical PVC cleaner, primers, glue. And then I like this tool, not necessary. A good old hacksaw, handsaw will do, but this sure does make quick work of cutting pipe. Love this tool. And then for fittings, there's so many options you have. One thing that you want to consider, especially if you go with the IBC tote like I originally did, is you'll want the ability to move them or disconnect them for various reasons throughout the season or what have you. And one of the things you can do is you can get plumbing connections that have an O-ring and a seal. And this was a big part of my original strategy. Some of the stuff that I have there in my loft, that's all the excess pieces, tied into some of these pieces as well. And that makes for something handy. It is important when you do your rain catch system, if you're using an above ground tank, that you don't make any hard connections to it, any hard line connections. That tank will expand and contract over time with temperature and with water in it, and hard connections to it can certainly cause a break. So not a lot of tools needed. The downside to these, they're pricey. This particular bag was about this, I believe it came with 5 per bag. Yeah, it's a 5-pack. This 5-pack at the hardware store was like 25 bucks. A little bit cheaper that way, but these fittings can run as much as anywhere from $3 to $8, $10 a piece. That adds up real quick. But remember too, you don't always have to necessarily put a fitting. It's pretty flexible. You can go around a lot of corners with this, and that will save you a lot of time and trouble when you're setting up your plumbing. So an excellent question, if you're paying attention. In central Illinois, we get some cold weather here. In the past, what I would do is actually at the end of the fall, beginning of winter time, once the weather's starting to freeze, I would move 2 of those totes into this garage about where the washing machine is and stack them on top of each other and then backfill them with the other 2 to give me about 500 gallons of water. And that 500 would need to last me for my workshop purposes all the way through the spring. It's time consuming, a lot of energy is spent. I'm using these quick connect, disconnect fittings to get the tanks apart and shuffle them around. And that's a lot of pain. So since I do have power out to my shop, it is off grid. It also has the ability electrically to be on grid. I have a tank warmer. Now this tank warmer is a heavy duty style. It's designed to be used with plastic tanks. So if it were to sit on the bottom of the tank, it stands up on these feet and it won't melt the tank. This tank warmer, they say is good for 300 gallons out in the field for your horses or your cows, but that's 300 gallons in an open tank. So, the top open to the elements where your livestock will be drinking from it. This tank is not, or it's a predominantly closed tank, but I also have the ability to put some insulation wrap around the tank that increases its thermal ability. And as long as I keep the bottom portion of the tank from completely freezing, I'm able to flow water through it year round. So this particular unit draws up to 1500 watts once it reaches freezing, and then it cycles on and off, and that keeps your tank from freezing during the winter. Obviously, I run the risk with a power outage where I lose that, ice storm, what have you. I have 3 forms of energy out here, technically 4, but I have 3 forms of energy. One, the shop runs off of solar power, and we'll cover that in another video. I also have a 9K generator that I can crank up and run. And of course, I also have propane out here that I can crank in, and I can apply heaters. And the other item is, by that tank not being a permanent mount tank in terms of it has flexible couplings to it, I can actually drain the tank off. I can bring that tank through the garage, and even though when it's empty, it weighs about 160 pounds, and I can actually handle it by rolling it and sliding it. I can place the tank in the garage if I have to in the winter and hook it right to my pump, and we're off and running. But that's in a worst case scenario when all other areas failed. But this type of heater is adequate for keeping the tank from freezing, and with the lines being fully insulated, it keeps them from freezing, and we have year-round water whenever that we need it. All right, let's talk about how we operate the pump for the off-grid rain catch system. So I have a couple of options here, and the primary one was be able to make this area completely off-grid self-sufficient. With that being said, the pump that we're using had to be able to run either DC volts, like off a car battery type thing, or run on AC volts like you have when you plug in at your house. My solar array system here, which I'll cover in some detail later, is capable of supplying both an AC and a DC amount of energy to a pump or anything that I may be wanting to use. The question is, which one did I want to use? And just a couple thoughts on that. So DC wiring, a DC pump is pretty reasonable. Shurflo actually has a very powerful DC pump that's rated for marine use and continuous operation. And those are kind of pumps could go out on a shrimp boat out into the deep ocean and last, years and years is the whole idea. So we certainly could go with something like that. The one problem with a DC pump or DC wiring is that the further distance that you run with DC wiring, the larger gauge of wire you need, because you actually lose a little bit of the go over the distance. So I wanted to make sure I had a pump system that I could put the pump anywhere I wanted and just plug it into a drop cord or plug it into the main portion of the shop. So I opted to go with a regular AC pump, which is, I think they rated at 115 volts, but your power at your house can go from low 110s to 120s. So that's an AC pump that I use. Now with this system, I'm able to generate power, 24 volts that come in from my battery bank. Of course, it's pouring down rain and it's overcast outside, so we're not making a lot of power right now. But it comes in from the outside, run my battery bank at 24 volts, and I convert it over to the power that I need to run my 110 and 220 volt systems up to 30 amp rating off of my Magnum energy inverter, and away you go. So my off-grid system has a lot of capabilities. This particular shop has the ability to run both off-grid and on-grid when it comes to electricity. And because of that, when the solar isn't running or what have you, I can just plug it into the regular grid, and I've got all the water pressure that I want from my shop. So let's talk about the usage of the rainwater, why I would have it, different things. So this particular location where I am, getting water to it from the main street line was going to be a real problem. We have some areas in the yard and in the location between the main water line to here that create a tremendous problem and an obstacle between the septic tank system and some other issues that go on in this yard. And I also wanted the opportunity to experiment with some other alternative means because I'd already begun to run the shop off of solar power for my electricity. So this is just a natural fit. Does this save money? Does it save money? And the answer is absolutely not. This is not a money savings. Now granted, if I was plumbing the shop with regular water from a well or coming in from a city utility, I would still have all the expense in regular plumbing lines to the toilet, to the sink, to the shower. That would be normal, and you would have to have that. So we can't count that cost. But the cost of the actual rainwater collection in the beginning, with the extra tubes outside off my gutter, you have to have gutters. Okay, you have to have gutters. And you have to, it's a good idea to have the covers in the gutters to keep the leaves and debris out. But the pipes that run from that point forward, that does start to add up. So ultimately, I probably have, maybe somewhere under $200 in various types of pieces of plumbing that ultimately reach the tank. And then, like we've talked about with the cost of the tank, a tank like that's about $600. You'll find them with shipping. You're going to spend about $1,000 on the tank any way that you slice it. Now, if you have a well system in your shop or your house, you're still going to have a pressure tank, even with a standard well. So that's really not an expense that I would count in any way, shape, or form. This is going to be necessary, but you have to have the pump. The good news is, at least those Pentar Shurflo pumps, they're pretty inexpensive. I think I got each one of those. A couple of them, I believe I got them for under $70 shipped Prime on Amazon. So you can get those pretty reasonably priced. You can obviously also invest in a larger pump. One thing I do want to mention, there's probably somebody out there wondering, why is he running 1/2-inch line here? Well, there's some dynamics when it comes to water pressure, and what happens. If I ran 3/4 lines coming off that particular pump throughout everything in my system, believe it or not, that larger volume reduces my pressure flow. I tried it in a previous experiment. And so ultimately, to maintain a very comprehensive water flow to this that you would have in a house or a regular shop, I needed to reduce my line to 1/2 inch. Outside, I have regular 3/4 or 5/8 style garden hoses that hook up. But ultimately, this is a smaller line and it generates better pressure over time. Also, another issue that you think about is actual volume of water. Pumps like this pump somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 gallons per minute, okay? Not a lot. In your house, you could probably flow, in an average house or average high quality well, you might flow 5 or 6 gallons a minute, possibly, somewhere in that ballpark. So the 2.5 to 3 gallons is slow, but it gets the job done. And one of the beauties of the Easy 101 water heater is it's actually designed to run off of very low pressure, and I can make some setting adjustments on it, and it gives me wonderful hot water fairly quickly. So that's what we have there. Now again, what do we use it for? What's the benefit to it? One thing I will tell you is washing cars is absolutely amazing. Rainwater doesn't have the iron in it that you find in well water. It doesn't have the chemicals that you find in it from processed city water. I can take we have a couple vehicles that are black. I can spray them down out in the drive out here, wash them, and let them air dry in the sun, and they will dry without water spotting. And that's one benefit of rainwater. What's another benefit of it? Well, once you start catching it, it's free. And in the case here, I actually have some chickens and ducks. My ducks go through a lot of water, a lot of water. In fact, I'll do a video on them too. They've never seen clean water that didn't have to be dirty almost instantaneously. So several times a week, I pump out their pools and I give them fresh water. It's nice to be able to give them this water. All we do is we pause it for just a little while between the time that it comes from the sky and hits the garage to the time that it ultimately hits the ground. Now, this particular shop also has a regular, proper septic system on it. One of the benefits of having that is everything in terms of the wastewater is 100% proper. And I actually didn't have to. We're out in the county, but I felt it was necessary to go ahead and work directly with the county on making sure, the city, to make sure I had the right permits and pieces and inspections. And whatever water doesn't go to wash a car or to take care of the ducks and chickens or any water in the yard. I also have a swimming pool, and the swimming pool evaporates during the hot sun. And it's nice to be able to fill it back up using the power of the sun to power my pump, and then to use the water that I've collected and paused for a little while and put it back in the pool. It saves me having to fill it up off the house water. So the benefits are many, but does it save any money? No. If you're getting regular water bills can be, anywhere for people from $30 to $100 a month, and you're not really using that much water with a 1,000-gallon tank, and I'll actually talk about that as well, in order to make that profitable to catch it from the rain instead of from the well. Also, you have to be careful. There are areas in this country that various regulators have stepped in for various reasons, and they've put restrictions on using or collecting rainwater. So be aware of that in your area before you set up a rain catch system, so you don't get in any trouble. Or if you do have restrictions, make sure it's set up properly. Which to me is kind of funny, because it's the rain and it's falling like it is now. It's free when it's coming down, so it ought to be free to collect it, but in some places it may not be. Also, people have been collecting rainwater for eons. Cisterns, which are basically dug out in-ground tanks to catch water and store it throughout the seasons or throughout the winter. Very common throughout the Midwest, colonial areas, and other places where rain catch has been critical for human existence for ages. But again, we don't drink this water, and we don't mix it with any of the street water system. This water stays out here, goes on the ground, or it takes care of our pets. I do have a filter for the shower, and when I do take a shower out here, I do a final filter of that before I take a shower. And it is nice to get done working on a car or be filthy from yard work and just jump in there and take a nice hot shower and you're over and done. And again, it's nice, fresh. A lot of people have water softeners in their house to get that fresh feeling where it suds up and your shampoo. Well, that always happens with rainwater. So talk a little bit about the practicality of rainwater. I'm using a 1,000 gallon system here. And again, we don't live off of this. I wash my cars, flush the toilet, wash my hands. I take care of chickens, ducks. Oh, I give the dog a bath as well. Hose things down. I backfill the swimming pool. Again, the water we use out here is not the same that we would use in the house. And I do have a washing machine out here that I hook up to wash shop towels and things. So we do use it, but I don't use it at the rate that you would use it in your home. But I want to share something that was fascinating to me to find out it was a truth. There is a commercial for a water filtration system that talks about the average American uses something like between 70 and 100 gallons of water a day. And I heard that commercial for years and years, and I thought to myself, what an absolute exaggeration. There's no way that I use, in a family of 3 right now here in my house, how in the world would each of us use 70, 80, 100 gallons a day? And then I started checking on that. My house gets city water, and I get a water bill in for the cubic feet. And they make it kind of confusing because we like to think in the terms, I like to think in the terms of gallons. When's the last time you told someone go to the grocery store and pick up a third of a cubic foot of milk? You know, we don't talk like that. We don't fill our fuel tanks in our cars with cubic feet of gasoline or diesel. So it's a hard number to follow, but the reality is that in my case, my city charges me for water by the cubic foot. So I did some math on it. And once I broke it down, I found out that by the gallon, my household of 3 people, we use 7,000 gallons of water a month. Okay, couldn't believe it. It's true. If you have a well, you'd have a really hard time seeing this in terms of other than your electric bill to run your pump. But when we're on city water, we absolutely burn through upwards of 7,000 gallons a month. That's combined, not a piece. It's a lot of water. So let's talk about this rain catch out here. I can catch today, this morning, my tank started off empty, and we've been raining today since about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock this morning until early afternoon, and the tank is right at full now for good moderate rain. So I can collect 1,000 gallons in a matter of a couple of hours. It's pretty easy to get that amount of water, even though it seems like a tremendous amount. But 1,000 gallons coming in, 1,000 gallons, it's really not that much. If I had to use this to live off of, we could, but we'd have to make some radical changes. There would be no, dishwashing. Dishwashing would be done very quickly by, probably damp towels. You would conserve flushing the toilet. You would conserve bathing. The amount of things you'd have to conserve if we actually tried to live off that would be crazy. Now, it's 1,000 gallons at a time, but technically, if you're getting rain every week or 2, you can do the math on that. That 1,000 gallons that's held in that tank is constantly being replenished if you have the regular amount of rain. So that could end up being 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 any given month. But I'll tell you where we are now. We're heading at late summer. We're coming into fall, and that's a typical time of year that we see a lot of drought in this area of the country. And honestly, it hasn't rained like this in weeks. And so this is a blessing today. Plus, I recently changed my tanks out, so I'm starting from scratch on the new tank, and I'm watching it fill. And again, it fills pretty quick. But if I had to try to run a household at the luxury and convenience that the typical American lives in, you couldn't do it. So I've seen some people off grid, they run 1,500 gallon tanks and they'll run multiple ones. You can purchase tanks like these up to 3,000 gallons. But I want you to picture that tank. I would need 7 of those that I refilled once a month total, 7 of those, in order to keep up with the kind of volume that we use in our house. And it's just not practical. But again, if I was out in the middle of absolutely nowhere where we couldn't drill a well and there was absolutely no way to get any other water connection to it, we'd make it work. 1,000 gallons replenishing pretty regularly can make it work. And also that particular tank does have a fitting on it, and if I wanted to get a secondary tank or a third tank, I could tee them in at the bottom and they would all fill up together. But I just wanted to give you an idea on the math. 1,000 gallons really isn't much more. These pumps are inherently noisy though. It actually has 3 different pump heads that are inside of here that form the pump system for it, the diaphragms that are in there, and it will kick on here shortly and you'll get an idea what kind of noise that it makes. It can be quite substantial whenever that does come on, and it will run until it fills up the, it will run, there it goes, and it's turned on. So this pump will run at that level until it reaches 45 psi. Now, I left a line open over here to force that tank to drain down. And you can tell by listening to the pump while it's running how close it's getting to full pressure, because it'll actually begin to change the sound as it fills up and reaches that point. And right at the very end, you'll hear it kind of go bump, 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 and then that's it. I listen out for this sound whenever I'm around the shop. This shop's quite a distance away from my house, and it can be difficult to know whether or not the pump is running. One thing I don't want to happen is to have a leak in the system and this pump run non-stop continuously. That certainly would be a problem. So I do keep an eye out for it to run, and you can hear it. And even now, start to step away, you can hear the pump from outside as well, because you get some of the vibrations of the pump, and you get just an entire sound coming through here. And when I touch the wall, you can feel the amount of the motion that pump is creating inside to generate that pressure. I'm personally very impressed at the robustness of these pumps and how they're able to work over time. It's pretty amazing. Show you a practical use of my rainwater catch. This is my duck pool. I have 2 of them, and these ducks regularly use this pool for entertaining themselves, relaxing, and washing themselves off. They also go along here and they skim along the edges of their pool and pick up whatever grubs and worms and whatnot that have become trapped in it, and they eat them. And of course they also poop in here, and so within a very short period of time this pool goes from crystal clear to a muddy, poopy mess. So probably, depending on the time of year, as little as maybe every 3 days to about once a week, I'm draining these pools and then cleaning them. And the rainwater is fantastic for that. It's so easy to collect it over there and pass it through here and put it right back out to the yard over there. So actually pretty soon, once they realize that this is spraying in the ground, they're all going to come up and start digging in it. But this is a regular use, weekly, of my rain catch system. So like I said, ducks never seen clean water that doesn't instantly need to be turned into mud. As they're working on this, and these 2 are enjoying the pool. So they very much appreciate clean water, so much that they make it dirty just so I can make it clean for them again. There you go. Like water off a duck's back. Now you know why they say that. So one of the uses that I have for the rainwater is obviously a shower. And the shower, I include a filter on it. It helps get any kind of particles and stuff out that weren't filtered through the rest of the system before I get in here. Really, I use this sometimes as a pre-shower or whatnot after doing a lot of yard work or working on a car. But one of the great things it works for is bathing my dog and allowing me, when the weather's colder, to give him a good warm bath as opposed to the outside hose. And one of the neat features that you can get is a bypass and a hose that you can use a regular spray hose in your shower. Now, one of the limits of using a water heater system like this is that it only heats the water during the time that it's flowing. So if you're doing a shower and you want to conserve water and kind of turn it on and off as you're bathing the dog, which is what I do, the unit will kick on and off as you use it, and it changes the temperature. So a lot of times you find the best way to operate one of these units is not even to add cold water. You make adjustments as necessary here, and you do all of your other adjustments on the hot side only. But I'm going to go ahead and get him started and give this guy a bath. He's been outside. You can hear the heater just turned on, and it is kind of warm there. It comes on really fast. Make some adjustments and go ahead and get this guy. Go ahead and get this guy cleaned up. He's got a little dog odor going on. So thank you for letting me share with you this rain catch system, how it works, how it's set up, what we use it for. I hope I've answered any questions that you might have about an off-grid system that you may be considering. I know that there are a lot of different ways to do it, and I hope that whatever way that you choose to make yours works even better than mine does. But if this is as good as you get, you got a pretty good system. We've enjoyed it, and it just keeps getting better. If you have any questions, just put them down below, and I'll be happy to answer for you anything that I can. If you have any criticisms of it, by all means, put it down below. We'll talk about that as well. I do not claim to be an expert with water systems or rain catch. The things that I've learned have been from reading and studying videos from other people like you. So again, thank you.